Hi, it's Joy Taylor with Codes to Confidence Interviews and Melanie Gow. Melanie, hi.
Hi, lovely to see you.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. And I want to set the context, not to intimidate you in any way by your own past, but folks, Melanie is a beautiful woman, as you can already sense, but she's also a very accomplished and sought after legend maker. Melanie is a legend in her own right. She wrote Walking with Angels, an extraordinary book outlining with photos and excellent expose, you and your two sons. And I want to hear a little bit more about that in the interview. But you also now, you really have yourself accomplished quite a bit with the TEDx talk you did there in England. You had a tour, sold out audiences. You've been interviewed on lots of radio stations, including BBC National. And from all of that, you've grown as an individual, but you've learned a lot about becoming an authority and helping other people build authority assets, which is what you focus on today. And just first, I want to say thanks for being here.
Joy, thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor and a pleasure.
All right. Well, let's really get to the topic, and then we'll weave in some of your experiences, because I want to know more about you too. We've only met about 6 months ago, and I've had some interaction. What blew me away was when you got on stage and you told a story and introduced the services that you offer at a conference. And I was one of the first people who ran up with $500 and said, I'm in. What gives you the courage to get in front of people and speak so eloquently?
Well, thank you so much for saying that. That's very gratifying. That was a really fun day, but possibly only in hindsight, or certainly wasn't fun 2 minutes before. You know that kind of like, oh my gosh, am I going to do this? And that's the weird thing about confidence, is it wanes and it's fickle and it's not always there when you need it. And so you asked me what got me there. And that has got to be a really, really long time ago. And that has to be something to do with, it's to do with the audience. Of course it is. Or it's to do with other people. It's to do with the connection. And I think the very first time I ever felt that connection with other people, and that rush where everybody in that connection was lifted, that is when I realized, first of all, it wasn't about me. Mm-hmm. And it was only ever going to exist if there was somebody else receiving it. And I wanted that connection. So I think that drove me to try it in different ways. I didn't really understand what it was at the time. I probably started out at 13 on a sales floor somewhere, and ended up at 53 on stages doing tours, talking about something that transformed the people who were in the audience.
So this is a big key, and I so resonate with this. Also doing some public speaking is, as soon as I make it about the people in front of me, so much of the fear falls away. It's no longer what are they going to think about me? It's like, how can I serve the people here? And so when you talk about confidence, the confidence to speak, the first thing really you said is it's about connection and the audience. So does that, do you think, apply in general? Like the confidence to leave a safe job and try something new. The confidence to speak in public is a big one. I know a lot of people are worried about. The confidence to do a Facebook Live, the confidence to put a product out in the world, to write a book, to create authority assets, and you help people do that. What are the keys to that confidence?
I mean, we've already said it's the connection. And the interesting thing is that when I very first met you, I loved the connection. I was completely addicted to you. But I see that you are also a connector. It's not about you, it's about the person serving. You're serving. And that's what I completely, it was like you were like a vibration and I was an antenna, or, you were the antenna and I was the vibration, but whatever it was, I connected with you person to person. So there's the answer to the question, can it be done outside of the stage? Which means then it has to be possible to do it in any situation. And I think you've probably identified it really well. If we're in a job and we want to leave it, that isn't the same as having the courage to stay on stage, or you could argue it isn't. But the minute you left that job, it would be the connections you had with other people that would get you another job or another start or to wherever it is you wanted to go. So it must be, confidence must come from connecting, but just before confidence, because it is a fickle thing, I've always found that it has two legs. I'm going to put that pen down. The writer in me, I've picked up a pen already. It has two legs, doesn't it? For me, courage and determination. So when you don't know the outcome, courage and determination will get you to the point where confidence will become apparent, or confidence will just be available. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. And so I'm kind of playing with this connection piece, because I think it is so much a code to success in life. And recognizing we don't do things alone, and that we actually do get uplifted by others' energy. Are you intentional about the kinds of people you spend time with? Or if you want to grow in confidence in one arena, do you seek out people who've climbed that mountain? Do you recommend others do?
Have you got telepathy?
Oh, good.
So if I nobody's perfect, right? So you have to remember to get back into intention. But I think I learned about intention at a really good point in my life. I'm a mom, but I'm now a single mom, and I've been a single mom for, I don't know, maybe 15 years, something like that. And my first son was really ill when he was born. Nothing dramatic. He just had allergies, eczema, asthma. But he just had them really badly. And at one point he became profoundly deaf in one ear, although temporarily. And it was just about the point he was learning phonetics. So he started to display some learning difficulties just because he couldn't hear. And we went to the doctors, and he was on medication. He was on something every 4 hours. He was on a steroid at night and a steroid in the day, and up to the wazoo in stuff. And he got an infection that just made him properly deaf. And the doctor said, okay, we're going to start operating. But you should just know, and he casually threw this one over his shoulder, you should just know that the amount of operations your son's going to need, there is a 70% chance that he'll have permanent scarring on his eardrum, and, that will affect his hearing. But, but it's better, right? And I kind of went home and went, oh, wait a minute, I thought I was doing all this stuff so that he would get better. And now you've just told me this could just get worse, but we're just going to have to live with it. And I read a different book. See, this is why books are very, very important. They put information and inspiration out into the world. I read a different book, and within 6 months, I had him off all his medication, and that didn't mean he was better, but it did mean he never had an operation on his ears. And, he grew up to be a child that walked over a mountain and across a country, hence the book that you were showing everybody. But during that time, somebody said to me, what did you do to make him better? And I thought, well, I don't know. Well, I do. I just don't know why. And I don't know how. And I spent a lot of time researching medical systems around the world. And one of them was the Eastern philosophies of intention and the American NLP of mind-body connection. So I had ancient stories and these, science to back it all up. And that's when I learned about intention. And I think in all of that exploration, that's when I learned that you can't be in growth and protection at the same time, even at a cellular level. A single cell cannot be in protection against, for example, a disease and in growth. And that's been kind of a guiding light, as in, if I play small or if I don't take the risks, then I can't grow. And so, yes, when I remember, because none of us are perfect, we're all on that, school run or juggling or whatever, I do set the intention. And what I find particularly fascinating is that as soon as you set your attention and your awareness opens up and you're in the present, all those lovely things that we are taught and do believe, suddenly you see all of the information coming in, and it's you are so receptive, and suddenly that's when you've got so much more to work with.
Well, and some of that information does come in through the people we meet. Isn't
Yes.
it fascinating?
And that's the connection, isn't it? Because if you're not open and aware, you don't necessarily see it. Mm-hmm. And if you're closed or internalizing things or worried or in protection, mm-hmm. you miss so much of what's coming your way.
Mm-hmm. So you bring up this idea of growth. I'm a growth junkie. I love growth, personal growth, spiritual growth, growing my muscles. It's all good, right? Oh, you too. Shit. Well, anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. Don't distract me. Growth is so powerful, and we grow in confidence. I want to go back to that theme of what you said about it being fickle, but also not always dependable. And, obviously it's easier for you to get on stage than it is for some of the people listening right now, because you have experience doing that. So how important is skill building and just practice and putting yourself in a growth situation? How important is that in building confidence? Or do you see confidence mostly as a energy more than a skill or a quality?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think of confidence as being a compound energy. Mm. So as you say, I might be confident on a stage today, but I sure as heck wasn't the first time I stepped on the stage, or the first time I walked into a party where I didn't know anyone. Mm-hmm. That is terrifying. That's just another stage. Anytime that we put ourselves into a job interview, it's the same energy that you're putting yourself right at the edge of your comfort zone, and right there where the disruption is, that's where the growth is.
Well, do you find the more you put yourself at the edge of your comfort zone, the more comfortable or confident you are being on the edge of your comfort zone in whatever arena it is?
I think it's one of those right sort of acknowledgements that you're now accustomed to the terror. But and sometimes it's a bit like going to the gym. If you go to the gym every week and you push yourself, you come home every week hurting. But one day if you go in and you go back and you say you pick up a light weight that you first started out with, that's when you realize how strong you've got. But so if you're constantly pushing yourself, I think you have to take a little bit of a pause to see, just to integrate and assess that you've come a long way.
Well, and you brought up that growth and protection. So is the protection, would that be, you talked about a self, for us, would that be self-care or renewal time? When are we in protection, and what role does that play in our confidence and just ability to do bigger things in the world?
Oh, there's an interesting question that you just came and threw at me from out left field. So when are we in protection? So self-care can have a flip side. It can actually end up keeping us small because we're like, oh yeah, no, we need to. And of course, stress
I
can be.
saw an article on LinkedIn, you wrote about that.
Um, you know, self-care can you can create a bubble of self-care. You're like, well, I'm just doing self-care. It's really important to do self-care, when it could just be avoidance, or it could be a bubble. And of course, anxiety isn't bad for us. Sometimes people need a little bit of stress in a positive way. So these are all balances. I have 100% taken sabbaticals, we'll call them, at points where I've pushed it too far.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognize that maybe I just have no more resources left. And if I do one more thing, everything's going to break. And so I've learned to see those signs coming up. And when they come up, that's when I learn to take a break. But we're taking a break. We're just taking a rest. We're not quitting.
Oh, you would never quit. Which
the key is to take a break and not quit.
Let's go to the book, just because I love it. And tell me what happened for you. How did you grow as a person, as a mom, as an athlete?
Okay, so this very briefly is, I took my sons over the Pyrenees Mountains in France and across Spain for 800 kilometers. We walked for 33 days, and they were 16 and 12 at the time. And yes, I did it as a single mom, so a woman. I did it without training, or no more training than I was doing on the school run and juggling all those things we do. Even if I had had time, I saw evidence on the walk that all the training in the world didn't stop you damaging yourself if you didn't listen to yourself. Here's the interesting thing, that I didn't have any confidence to do that. But by this point, I just realized I was a grown-up, so I knew we were going to simply do it one day at a time, and that we would grow the resources as we walked. If I had waited until I was ready, my kids would have left home, and that time would have passed. So that was really, maybe sometimes things like that are important. So the whole thing was actually just a response to a yes. I'd read a book back in the day by Paulo Coelho, and I put it on a bucket list. But we were watching a film with my two sons. It was a middle-aged women, people walking and talking. It's called The Way. If you know it, you know it. I don't recommend it. As a filmmaker, I don't recommend it. It's a terrible film, unless it changes your life. But it certainly wasn't the sort of film my children, my sons, would naturally have taken to on a Friday evening. Actually, it was a Tuesday, and it was sort of in November, and it was miserable outside. And we had sausage and mash and peas for dinner, and we watched the film. But as the credits rolled, both the boys turned around and said, "Can we do that?" Now, kids ask for things, and you often say, "Sure, put it on your Christmas list." And you know full well you're never going to have to commit to it. But this was one of those asks that, there was one answer, and that was a really wholehearted yes. And we didn't know why we were going, but you don't always have to know why you do something. I did know it was going to be the space that my sons could choose what kind of men they wanted to be. But by this point, I was older and more cynical, and I've done plenty of personal growth and certainly don't need any of that, and have a healthy dose of English cynicism. So I know what I'm doing. I'm just getting to the boys, and we're going to go across this country, and that's that. But the interesting thing is day 14, we had been walking, as far as I was concerned, since the 13th century. We came into a village. We had to set off at 5 o'clock in the morning to beat the heat. I've got blisters. I've dumped half the stuff I was taking with me. And, you know, in that metaphor, I'm down to very little baggage. Everything I was carrying fits on an A3 piece of paper. I'm washing something, drying it, put it back on, and that's how we live. But day 14, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. It's really hot. We stop for a drink, and I stand up to get back on the road, and my knee gives way, and I sit right back down, and it's impossible. I'm saying no, but there is a sign next to us with a taxi cab number on it, or a cab number, and my sons say to me, "Maybe that's a sign, Mum." And I laughed and laughed, and I said, "Sure, okay, we will catch a taxi or a cab." And the boys turned around to me and said, "No, we're going to walk. You're taking the cab." And I just, you just don't get, sometimes you can miss the big moments in life. And for a beat, I saw it. And I watched my boys walk off while I waited for the cab. And I thought to myself, that is the last time I'm going to see my boys. The next time I see them, they will be men. It was day 14 and my job was done. And all I had was what was in it for me. Essentially, they were gone. They walked ahead of me and I was trailing behind. And I was left with that question of, well, what do I do with this walk? If the reason I came on it was to give my sons the space to decide what kind of men they want to be, and they became those men, and it's just going to be from here on in a growth, what do I do? And it was transformational in ways that I couldn't possibly imagine. We had to decide to get up every day and go on that walk. We could have gone home at any time. And there was a time when I thought I was going to be the reason we all went home. And I quickly learned that, you have to tune into yourself, and you have to give up being perfect and get on with a far more interesting job of being yourself. And from there on, I realized personal growth happens all the time. We are kind of fragments of ourselves trying to come together whole. And the only place we can find that is at the edge. And sometimes, we get bruised at the edge. It's tough. But everybody who stays safe and tells themselves that they are wise and rational to want so little from life is probably, they can hear the lances clashing and the battle cries, and they can hear the hearts breaking, and they can hear those bones breaking. And they're like, oh yes, we made a good decision. But what they miss is that fire inside where you are, you're alive, and they miss that glint. You can see the glint in people's eyes when they've pushed themselves and their world just got bigger. And that's the addiction of transformation, isn't it? When you see somebody's just their whole being just lights up, and it comes from inside, and they don't know what to do with it because they just got bigger and they just don't know how to fill that space just yet. But there's that glee, absolutely. And so I love it for myself, and I'm addicted to making it possible for other people. And I ended up with, as you mentioned, the book was crowdfunded. It was 178% crowdfunded in 28 days because I asked. I had a photographic exhibition that toured the entire length of the UK, the same distance from my house as I had just walked, ironically. And I ended up with the TED Talk, the national speaking tour. And the thing that I realized was that the reason my story was on the stage was because I dared to make it visible. I dared to be visible. And there are 18,000 people who walk that walk every day, every day. So why is it my story that was on the stage? And it's because we know how to make to tell a story that connects, because the magic's in that sweet spot of connection, and that's what I've grown into, is that person who can make that legend out of someone else. Because the more stories we tell that connect, the more everyone's going to feel whole.
You really light up when you tell that story, and as you really rest into who you are and what you're about, like, wow, I think we're all just buzzing, everyone listening, to the recording, and me right now. It's so contagious too, isn't it?
Oh,
What I heard was stop the perfection, right? I heard you say it's beyond perfection. And we find ourselves at the edge. We find ourselves when we go out of that comfort and we are living more on the edge. And then you shared how important it is to dare to be visible.
yes.
So you could have taken that personal growth, right? And those photos and put it in an album and in your heart and lived your life, which is beautiful. But I'm so grateful that you chose to say, no, I want to share this. I want to inspire people and inspire people to live on their edge, to be uncomfortable, to get blisters and keep walking, and to make life about them and their transformation. I heard that too. And, you really did bring it around here to connection, which is interesting. We started the interview with you saying confidence is all about connection. I mean, life is about connection. We want to connect, and in connecting, what I think you said is we just are more naturally confident. Would that be true?
What I think is that we don't exist if we aren't connected. And so for me, a piece of artwork or a film, my boys watched a film. Well, that film doesn't really exist unless someone's watching it. A book doesn't really exist if it's not being read. So, the greatest things we produce really exist when they're observed and shared. And when they make connection, that's when we're laughing at something on a screen that doesn't really exist. It's just light and color. And we cry when our TV heroes die, and they're not real, they're just characters, but it's that connection. So I think it's the confidence comes in the reflection of the connection, because people show you who you are, and you then see them and they see you, and it's just exponential. Again, confidence becomes this sort of compound energy. You do something and that you feel a little bit more confident, and then so you dare again, and then you dare again, and each time the confidence grows. I mean, I am ridiculous at deciding that it's, I have to try the next thing. And every time I do, I don't feel confident, but I do now know that I have some resources. They'll probably take me through it. And the prize on the other side is I meet people like you, Joy, and your name is Joy. And I would never have met you if you and I hadn't gone to the edges, because I live in England and you live there.
I'm glad we met on the edge, and I think we'll be walking on the edge together for a while.
I'm so excited.
Mm-hmm. And, what you did for me, and I want to share it with our audience today too, people who are viewing this, people who are part of Coach to Confidence. What you did for me in our session was really help me identify, what do I have that's worth telling? How am I relevant to the world? And what are those little unique sparks that my life has taught me, my transformation is driving me towards? And it was a powerful experience working with you, and look forward to doing more of it. So for people who are interested in what you do, how do they get a hold of you? And just briefly describe, what you do as a legend maker.
Well, what I do, I mean, if I described it simply, I would almost sound like a journalist. I interview you, and then I tell you your story. But what I really do is I curate people's genius.
Mm-hmm.
So everything you've learned, everything you've experienced, and everything you believe, there's a lot of it. And sometimes you need somebody else outside to see the bits that really connect. Steve Jobs gave a commencement speech about understanding life in hindsight. That's when you can join the dots.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're forming those dots, we don't know which dots are relevant, which two to join, and which ones make sense. And you just sometimes need somebody outside who can then see it. And maybe I'm just a very skilled dot joiner. Is that a job title? Anyway.
Yeah, I actually like curating genius. I really love that phrase, and it's exactly what you do. And from there, we can then write our books or create our speeches, our signature talks. And even I do think people who are in transition, who are just like, what is my core essence of who I am and how do I want to express it in the world, whether it's through a job, a career, being a mom, whatever that edge is for them. I know you're a guide for that as well.
Thank you. There is that curating the genius. It's so useful because it's like an identity capital. If you're going to put it in some kind of business terms, it's an identity capital, and from that you kind of future-proofed. And everything else is just a delivery system. You know, whether you want to give a talk or write a book, but it's also really useful if you're changing jobs, because a CV is just a really bare bones sketch of who you are. This is about who you believe, what you believe, and why, and then why anybody else should care, because it's back to that connection. We exist in the connection.
So how do we get a hold of you?
Oh, that bit, yes. Currently, I am available. I'm on Facebook or the other social media sites, LinkedIn, and email. Anybody's welcome to, do you want me to just give the email out here?
Yeah, and I'll put it down below in the description too.
Okay, it's really simple. It's Mel Gow. That's M-E-L, and it's Gow, G-O-W, which is like wow, but with a G. See? And then that's at me.com.
You know, and it's one letter away from grow.
That is a beautiful way of saying that. Thank you.
You are.
Coming on.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much for shedding light and offering another code to confidence. I really enjoy spending time with you. And thank you everyone for being here in the community. Signing off. This is Joy. Live a soul-inspired life.